So, we all hear a lot of panels. And so we decided to try something a little different today. So we're going to invite you into a fishbowl. And the rules for a fishbowl is we get to have a conversation amongst ourselves, and you get to eavesdrop. And we thought that might be fun, particularly as a way for us to engage with one another and for you to engage in a more passive kind of way, but to be engaged in the ideas that are tossed around by this very diverse group of individuals. So I'm going to start. I was reading an article the other day about the life of Maya Angelou, and I ran across a quote that I thought was particularly important for today. She said, "People won't remember what you said, people won't remember what you did, but people will remember what you made them feel." Mm-hmm. And so let's start from a place of feelings. All of you come from different areas, have different expertise, different experience. Let's talk about engagement and the work of the center through the lens of your life experience and what you're doing every day. Who wants to start? David, you want to start?
Sure, be glad to. I tell you, Maya Angelou was all about love. Yeah. And she wanted people to feel love, and she experienced love, specifically through her mother late in life, and then through her grandmother. But in my discipline, in football, it is all about engaging in others. You can't be on the team without engaging in someone else. You can't be a part of a really great team unless you trust them, unless you love them. I think in creativity, what Flint does, or in music, what you do, you are all about harmony, about everybody playing a role. I mean, we got fat guys in football. You got tubas, okay? We got little people. You got piccolos. Everybody has their role, and you have to learn that in that huddle, it's all about inclusion. It's all about the science of being a team, and not just how I get the most out of myself, but how I help the person next to me get the most out of them, because we're all in it together. Mm-hmm. It may be, and one of the things that I think is unfortunate, Monica, because I think sometimes people think that the classroom is where learning occurs, and the field or the court of play is where exercise is had. And in reality, it's not about, just the brain or the body. It's about the heart. And I think Maya Angelou was of that belief that the heart drives the brain and the body in every way possible. So I think it's a place where we can learn how to be a team. And if we can learn how to be a team, we can learn how to be a family. If we can learn how to be a family, we can learn how to have great companies, like in the stuff that Flint does. And if we can have great companies, we can have great communities. And those communities can make us a great country.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I love that quote. I have two aspects to my artistic life. One is as a performer, and one as a teacher and educator. And I find that quote so applicable to both of my lives. I think I go on the stage, I don't know how many hundreds of times a year, and it's really true. We work so hard in our team effort to create a wonderful performance. But at the end of the day, it is never about the technical aspect of what we do. It's about how we make people feel. That's our job as musicians. As an educator, that's been one of the great joys of my life, because I think we all work. The technical aspect of playing an instrument is so demanding and so sometimes overwhelming to young students. And I find myself constantly saying, as recently as yesterday to one of my USC kids who's about to perform tonight, forget it all. I give you the freedom to forget all the details that we've been working on for the last semester and just go out and make yourself get goosebumps on your skin, because if you do that, you've accomplished your job. And I think engagement of I wanted to say also about young people. I think as a performer, one of my great joys in life is this program that my orchestra, the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, does called Meet the Music. And we bring a lot of inner city kids to this beautiful hall at the other music school, Colburn Music School, the Colburn Conservatory. And they come in groups of, I don't know, 300 kids for two different performances. And I think of all the places I've played in Carnegie Hall, at La Scala, and Queen Elizabeth Hall, all over the world, one of the great experiences of my life as a performer was a little boy stood up. A lot of these kids most of these kids have never been to a concert in their lives. This little boy stood up and he said, we did a Q&A, and he said, I don't have a question. I just have something to say. Today was the greatest day of my life. And you know, that's engagement.
Absolutely.
That's making a difference in someone's life. So I think the more we can do that, and that my passion is music, so I do it through music. But I think that kind of experiential gift that we give the kids is so important.
You know, we talk about the digital world, which you're so heavily involved in. And we sit in this room as different generations of digital experience, the digital immigrants, the digital natives. But now I like to talk about the digital devotees, the people that have grown up in a digital world and speak a different language and embrace those things very differently based on their experience. Flint, talk to us about the world in which you exist.
Oh, good. I don't have to talk about feelings. No, I'm just kidding.
Sure you do.
I was thinking about all this. I mean, you see, I don't see, right now I'm working at a company called Niantic, and we make geo-mobile augmented real-world games. We have Pokemon Go was our big hit, and then another game called Ingress. And then I'm working for DARPA, and we're doing a massive social network for engineers and scientists to expedite innovation. But at the end of the day, and it's what you were talking about Goosebumps, and where a speaker was talking about the senses that we don't take into account, that aren't, you know, sight and sound and smell and taste. And what it really gets to is every time I've had a good product, whether I'm playing it or I'm making it, it's a phrase I've used ever since I began. I never realized the reality of it, and that is you get the tingle. There's just this moment you start tingling and you know this thing's good. You know, and that doesn't mean there aren't 15 more horrible things that are going to happen in the project and you're done. It just simply means this is good. And you know, conversely, if you don't get the tingle, it's a squid. But you know the whole thing is that's what you want to give. You know, our stuff has to be fun or it dies. I mean, we don't have a choice of it not being fun and not giving the tingle. It's just the degree to which you give the tingle. And then the different layers of it as you go on. And I would argue, and then I'll stop talking, but you know, I would argue that with a game, it is impossible to make a game that's not educational in some way or another. You know, and so tying the tingle together with something that is advancing you, you know, that's the ultimate nirvana state we're looking for.
Absolutely. In the wall of the Innovation Center at my old school, there was a sign that said, fail early, fail fast.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're developing a whole generation of children who are a little bit risk adverse. And the silos in which we currently exist are problematic because it keeps us from engaging with one another. It tells us that our differences are so profound that we have no right to engage with one another. And yet, that's what education is. It's engagement and breaking open the doors of those silos and creating environments in which we can truly, on a very elemental level, take risks, fail, thrive from those failures, understand the learning paradigm that the next risk we take, we will have learned from the risk that we just finished. And Monica, when I think about risks, your job has some of the biggest risks imaginable, and especially in an environment nationally where there isn't a lot of dialogue going on around education and the benefits of education. So talk to us about what you're facing and what you're seeing when you think about engaging hundreds of thousands of students.
It's crazy, I have to tell you. Good afternoon. I'm so pleased to be here just because I was excited about what you all are wanting to learn and the love that you want to share. So in our world, in LA Unified, we are challenged every day to meet the needs of our students. And when we say 100% graduation, that means everybody. I come from a place where Gabriel Garcia Marquez said the university is a cemetery of ideas. And so I understand that schools are not the only place of learning. We learn inside, outside, right? That's the strategy. But if we can help our children be seen, if we can, and today's youth are demanding, see me, hear me, include me. They want to be part of the world and not limited by what the rest of us understand as limits. So I just turned 50, which makes me the middle of the school board, 3 older, 3 younger. But I always say, I am sufficiently inspired and sufficiently challenged. There are resilient and brilliant solutions every day. And I know each of you, whatever team you're on, whoever your client is, whoever your customer is, you can learn so much from our children. And they are hitting it all at the ballpark. We are 46th in the nation in per pupil spending in California. But every day, children with backpacks filled with challenges that we don't always talk about come to school and want to be just like you. They want to be people who contribute, people who are awake, people who are invited to be part of the challenge. And so I think that this idea of engagement is something that we wrestle with because we want our children to have skills. We are preparing them for the world not yet. And it is so important that love and learning go together. I think when we start with the humanity piece, right? Those feelings, the passion, the energy, we have to remind ourselves not to be afraid of change. We have to remind ourselves to embrace the other. And for our children in LA Unified, we're 91% kids of color and 76% kids of free and reduced lunch. And as a Trojan myself, I have to tell you, I remember coming into this room and being, wow, this is a wild kind of room, right? And so it is the people who help you see yourself and who extend the possibility of what can be. And then if the learning goes back and forth, Alan gets to learn from me and I get to learn from Alan. And I get to learn from Dean Gallagher and she gets to learn from me. And when you're with the class of 2030, who are our kindergarteners, and they get up and they say, we want to change the world. And they're not afraid to try. And that's a beautiful thing. So I think the challenge is to help people not step away, but lean in. And to accept, let's put away the single stories. Those don't exist. The beauty of Los Angeles is that the world learns from us.
Absolutely. You know, I love the name Edge Center and what it stands for. Because for 44 years, I worked with teachers and said, we don't need to be on the leading edge. We need to be on the learning edge. So that everything we experience as adults and everything our students experience as students, we learn from and rechannel that energy, that commitment, that learning, that risk-taking back into moving the education paradigm along.
But can I say, I love hearing you talk about risk. Yeah, I loved hearing Dean Gallagher talking about almost promoting failure. Because we've got to take a chance, and frankly, we've got to learn to compete. In my business, it's all about competition. But so is globalization, so is the world economy in what we're doing. Our children are going to need to learn to be more noble and, compete more. And, we've got to, what you were talking about, have a generation that is prepared to risk, and measure that risk and mitigate that risk, but risk on something important. In my business, again, at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, it's very popular, but we calibrate greatness. There have been 300 million men and now women that have played the game of football. There's only 5 million that have played it in college, like my son did here at USC. There's only 29,000 who have ever been paid to play it, coach it, or officiate it in the National Football League. And in Canton, Ohio, there's only 310 bronze busts and 174 living Hall of Famers. So that's an extreme level of elite. But we all think that they fell out of bed great. We all thought that they were made that way, and they were not. In my business, our business, you know, it is not a pristine, you know, it's not guys in tuxedos playing instruments, and we know they had to work hard to get there. But in my business, it is snot coming out of your nose and blood coming out of your mouth or your ear. You have to fight to be great. But I think the same thing happens, you know, in getting to be a world-class musician, or in getting to be, you know, somebody who makes incredible games, or education, or being a great father, or being a great mother.
So we were speaking earlier about my son, unfortunately didn't choose the violin. He became a high-ranking sports person, and I think I've been fascinated to see how similar they are. And we were talking about trust and how we, you know, I think part of the problem, and I see as a parent, is that my generation overthinks parenting. We constantly are interfering in our children's lives and trying to control their outcome. And I see it a lot with my students, my younger students, my high school and kids over at Colburn, is that their parents are constantly micromanaging their creativity. You can't micromanage creativity. You have to give them the courage to take risk, and then you have to teach them how to trust. Because trust, especially in team sports, in orchestras, in chamber music, if you don't trust in each other, you have nothing. I mean, there is nothing in music that will survive that.
Absolutely. Another thing in the article I was reading about Maya Angelou said, she said, no child is born with courage, but every child is born with potential. Mm-hmm. And we have the opportunity as educators, as leaders, as parents, to help nurture and develop that potential. And to find that space in which every child can be successful.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's this is a brand new thought, so maybe a really bad one, so ignore it. But it just occurred to me. We're talking about this generation of participation trophies and helicopter parents and all that, and you know the lesson of sports, you know, is and frankly any performing art is you have to, what sports teaches you, it teaches you how to lose, and you know how to lose, get up, do it again, try to do it better, and go back. And so much we try to avoid is rigor, and I'm realizing the importance of just rigor. But it occurred to me the exact same moment they're handing out participation trophies and you know and sort of wimpifying the world, you have kids obsessed with their Xboxes and their PlayStations and their games, and your Xbox does not care that you have hurt feelings. Okay, it really doesn't matter to it. And is it possible that that's a compensation for the fact that it is human nature to want to compete and succeed or fail and know whether you've succeeded or failed? Mm-hmm. In other words, that's code they wrote to compensate for us, our outcome determination as opposed to input. That's, once again, maybe a good thought or a bad thought, but it just occurred to me.
Well, this digital world that we live in is so complex. We know that it's motivating, it's engaging, it can be addictive, which is something we should all watch out for, and it can isolate in certain kinds of ways, but it also has the potential, because as Sir Ken said, it's not going away, folks. We're just going to see more and more of it, but we've got to harness the power of the world in which these kids are living and teach them how to be courageous and teach them how to take risks and teach them to be engaged in ways that will be meaningful and that will bring meaning to their lives and hopefully to the rest of the world.
You know, it also strikes me that it's when we say personalization, for some of our English learners and our special ed kids, technology has been a way that really broke down walls. Mm-hmm. So where the teacher has skills that they can meet a number of needs, technology has been a bridge, and what we have to help kids do is come back and talk about it.
Absolutely.
Right? Use your verbal skills, share what you know, but not isolate it. I feel like we're expanding the toolbox, but we have to help them not get stuck in one way only. Right? So just multiple chances, lots of stimulation, letting them find their strengths, because Gallup tells us that's what you do in life, right? Keep working on those strengths. But technology in the classroom has been amazing, and the adults have been the learners as well, right?
Absolutely.
So we are still where it is not an option anymore. It is, but we have to keep learning how to connect, right? We are connectors.
And we have to learn that when children are so immersed, and the technology has been so seductive, and we now know so much more about the things that have been built into the technical tools that we use to invite that addiction, that we've got to teach temperance, we've got to teach discipline, we've got to teach risk-taking, but we've also got to teach the human skills that allow us to continue to connect with one another. And that's going to be critically important. At the start of the new millennium, we were talking about 21st century skills. People don't talk about them anymore, but we need to go back to thinking about collaboration and cooperation and creativity and risk-taking and the kinds of things we need to move ourselves out of the silos in which we currently find ourselves and back into mainstream society where our collection and our collaborative ideas can move us in ways that in isolation we cannot proceed.
Absolutely.
But I'd go back to what you said before. I think technology is the tool. It's
Yes.
not the end. Sir Ken talked about personalization.
Absolutely.
You talked about feeling. Whether you're an A student or an F student, which is an unfortunate way of grading people, to be quite honest with you, you're still going to need trust. You're still going to need love. You're going to still need discipline. You're going to need all those values that will help you in life. You're going to need perseverance. You're going to need communication. You're going to need to learn how to huddle up and, overcome that adversity on the other side of the line. Because, whether it's a healthcare crisis or making payroll in your company or whatever it is, it's not. Again, in what I do, it's not about the incredibly elite athlete who's making $30 million. No. It is about every kid boy or girl who competes, who learns how to interact with each other. Those are the people, by the way, who are defending our freedom and who are the first responders and who are raising our kids for tomorrow. And I think those are important interactions. And again, I commend what you're doing in terms of engagement, and allowing people to fail and saying, hey, because you fail doesn't mean you're a failure. It means you're a competitor. So let's learn from this and learn how to compete better and come back.
And the lesson from the Parkland students is they're engaged.
Yeah.
They experienced something that brought them together, gave them voice, allowed them to take risks, and we're learning from them the courage to take on society and to question, to not be passive. And that's what a center like this can do for students and for teachers. Allow them to be in a synergistic environment in which we learn from one another, we learn to live together, and we learn to take the kind of risks that can move us forward.
And I think in education as well, one of my challenges is kind of assessing, it sounds harsh, but it's actually, I think, important, is that you have to assess as a teacher and an educator, we're very focused, like very small. I'm a musician, I'm teaching a violin player to play violin, but some of my students are not going to go out and become Itzhak Perlman or Yo-Yo Ma. They're going to go out into the community to become, like you say, leaders of the community, the great thinkers, maybe other educators. And how I view my job is not only to teach them to play the violin at the highest level, but to make them like better human beings so that those are the people of the future. and can go out and change the world.
That's right. And we've had, in California, we've just celebrated 100,000 young people have registered to vote. So an election is coming, it starts with I matter, and you matter, and we matter. And if that is reinforced over and over, I think you get to the levels of living. So we say college ready, career, and life. And it is really about just that relationship. Have you experienced yourself in a positive space? It's so powerful for our children.
And we have to redefine success. There's been a very narrow definition of success. And yet, when I go and look at that new driveway I just had poured at my house, I think the most successful person is the concrete man who brought all of that concrete and made, that pile of rubble in front of my house look wonderful. We've got to redefine pathways for kids to engage and collaborate, and for kids to learn the meaning of a wonderful life.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's establishing, what you got to have is a dynamic of simultaneous competition and cooperation. I mean, all the great stuff comes out of that and breakthroughs. I don't care what you're talking about, Mr. Jobs and Mr. Gates, or even how the NFL functions, or the Beatles for that matter. I mean, John and Paul are, collaborating, cooperating with each other since they were in the air today. They were collaborating, competing at the same time, and the same thing with the Rolling Stones. I mean, they taught Mick Jagger and Keith Richards how to write songs, and those guys turned into their competition. And everybody won out of the entire equation. You know what I mean? And that's you want to have a system. The other thing is we got to get rid of this idea that there's an end state. Because the end state is, it's like, if I get this, I'm done and I've been successful. And it's like, no, you're alive the next day, and then what are you going to do? You know what I mean? I mean, it's you're constantly evolving and changing. And failure, well, that's a state I was in now. Hit reset, start over again. Do it. You just teach that, and success. That's it's Kipling. I mean, that's an imposter too. Yeah, and you just keep going. There is no end state, and I think schools ought to go on forever. You just come back and check in. I come and teach classes mainly because I learn more than the students do, and because I've got to get out of. I don't care how brilliant the people I'm talking to all day are. If I'm talking to the same 6 people, think the same 6 things. I'm not getting new ideas out of it. And that's where you get the mixing people around and the collaboration, and have people do stuff they're not good at. You know what I mean? Because that helps too.
Well, a parent called me and said, hey, what's grit? Because my kids' school, they talk about grit. It's perseverance. Is that what it is? But it's this idea, I mean, you're all talking about, can we teach the love of learning, and the learning is try and get up and fail, and try and get up and fail, and know that that's a process of living, of being, right? So we are absolutely, I think the center is calling for the best being possible, right? And reinforcing, you get to be, I get to be, and even if there's conflict, that's another way of being, and learn from it and keep growing. And that's fun. That's a lot of fun.
I mean,
that's
we're
getting it
all
right.
on different paths of lifelong learning.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've just got to make sure that as kids come into the systems in which they're going to learn, and into the homes that are going to teach them as well, that we challenge them to be lifelong learners, that we challenge them to understand that you never stop learning. And if we can instill in them a love of learning early, they will carry that through a lifetime of experiences and benefit from programs like the Edge Center. Will you join me in thanking our panel today?